This video is to show two different inventions. One was designed for treatment of female urinary incontinence and one was for treatment of male urinary incontinence. My invention is for female urinary incontinence as seen here, seen in this picture here. This video is to show that it is remarkably different than this implant, which is for male urinary incontinence. Much larger, different shape and different functions. So this implant here basically has a distal segment and what we call a proximal segment. Distal segment, proximal segment. And it basically goes in the retropubic space of a female to lay on top of the proximal urethra and overlay the lateral fascia. This is to go on top of reduction of urethral hypermobility or reduction of lateral defects, and place this on top. You can go on top of the repairs, or it can be set in here while there's reduction manually by placing fingers in the vagina as such. This has been described before on a different video, but this is the same view seen here on my invention, where the surgeon is in here placing the implant. This is the bladder and the urethra. Fingers in the vagina to reduce the hypermobility and any lateral defects, and then this implant is to fit in here as such. And we'll get back to this in a minute. So that's the female pelvis, that's the female implant. Another described implant for male urinary incontinence is like this here. This is depicted in this picture that describes this invention, basically describing this as free ends and this as the broadened area. The free ends are described as being between 50 and 60 centimeters long from this end to this end, but tapered end as you see here. These are tapered ends. And the broadened area, that is 5 centimeters wide by 4 centimeters long. It has an area on the broadened area that's an expandable cushion that encompasses more area than over half the area as depicted here. This is the expandable cushion, and then there's two holes here such as these black marks here, and that was designed so that this implant can be placed over the male urethra as such, brought back around and popped through these small holes as such, and we'll show that again in a minute. So these again are the free ends, and this is the broadened area. This is the distal segment, and this is the proximal segment. As you can see, these are quite different in that this wide area is basically much longer than this. This is 1.5, this is 2.5. This distal segment here is 2.5 by 2 or 2.5 with a smaller expandable cushion that goes here and pushes downward on the urethra. This is a much larger expandable cushion necessary to compress the male urethra in a much larger area. So basically this implant was designed as a male urethral sling with an expandable cushion. It goes underneath the urethra instead of on top of it. Has much larger and longer dimensions in order to accommodate the differences in the anatomy between a male and a female. So this implant of mine is again not a sling, it's an onlay to reinforce or reduce pelvic floor defects. So we'll go to this model and show basically what is depicted in this picture here. This is the more softer version of this. Basically this lays right on top of the male urethra. Now a point of note of the male urethra, and this is the female. Female urinates right up under the pelvic bone, and this would be the vagina here. A male's urethra is different in that there's a prostate behind here, and the urethra comes up to what's called the bulbar urethra, which is very big and thick. The urethra itself is inside here, but is surrounded by some thick musculature to assist with ejaculation and other functions that women don't have. So this is a much larger urethra with the bulbar spongiosal muscle around it, plus this implant is to lay over the urethra, the bulbospongiosus muscle and to wrap around these pubic bone structures. So the dimensions described in this invention are intended to go in this area to cover this broadened area in the midline, to use a transoperator approach for these free ends to be punctured through the fascia, through the operator canal, back onto itself, and come out through here. Now I have this clipped in place just for demonstration, but as said, there's little holes here on this broadened area in order to bring back through this strip of long non-absorbent material. So it's key to note that this length, or this distance here, is about 1.5 centimeters, again, as well as with this one. Unlike this, which is more like 2.5 centimeters. You would never use something of this length in this dimension to use as a guide to drag through with a trocar to pierce through fascial planes. Again, because this is an on leg. This is not a sling, and this was not designed to pierce through fascial planes. In this invention, basically sets itself apart from previous described suburethral male implants, in which a piece of non-absorbable material was placed between these two pubic rami and to place upon the bulbar urethra with suburethral compression. And in this depicted picture, these are bone anchors. This invention was brought about so that an incision could be made here, and this type of device could puncture through here and basically route this entire free end around here and to drag through these fascial planes. You could not carry out such a function with an implant such as this. So looking at this invention here with the expandable body, which again encompasses most of the broadened area with these two punctured holes, this broadened area, which is compared to this area, this is 2.5 by 2.5, and this is 5 by 4 centimeters. This is an actual size of a female bony pelvis. As you can see here, ignoring the male parts and ignoring this implant placed in here, but if you were to bring this type of implant and try to place it in the female pelvis, you could see that functionally this would provide, well, for one, would not fit adequately. It would not provide the benefits needed for a couple of reasons. We're going to move to the other model. As you can see in this model is a rendition of the female anatomy. There is no prostate here. You have a short proximal urethra and a bladder, and this is the arcus tendinus, which is the part of the lateral pelvic fascia, being this the obturator internus, and some more of the periurethral fascia. This implant would not fit in here and provide the function needed. For instance, we're going to place this here. As you can see, for one, this being 5 centimeters in width would never make it into this pubic arch angle. For one, you would need this implant to go all the way to where the urethra passed underneath this pubic symphysis in order to place this adequately in this space. This will not fit. This was designed to fit in this place, as you can see here, as this fits right up under here as such. This distal segment right over the proximal urethra is designed, and this expandable body is the perfect shape and size in order to provide focal compression of the urethra from this direction. It is also of note in this design that the expandable body is basically on the other side of the broadened area, in which that would provide no functional benefit. It's too long, it's too deep, it's too wide. Excuse me, scratch that. It is too wide and too long. It is also not overlying the proximal urethra appropriately in order to provide focal compression. It is of note that this was designed as such and described in this invention's description that this was intended to be broad over a 5 centimeter length, as recognized the amount of bulbospongiosa muscle tissue around it would provide a broad area of compression of this area needed to be wide as such. This also fixation is not provided with suturing at four corners, as there is no fusiform fascia lateral to the structure as it is in the female urethra, in which there's fascia going to the upper part of the urethra and to the bottom part, to which anchoring sutures can place the graft on top of this and hold in place. There is no fascia, there is no periurethral fascia, there's the perineal membrane. So that's why this is relying on a sling type technology, plus not only sling but also fixation in 4 different quadrants by sling. It is also of note on my implant that this segment is 2.5 centimeters by 10 centimeters at its minimum. That length was appropriate as this spans the limits of the pelvic fascia, being from the obturator out to the pelvic wing, as you can see as such. When this is placed in its reduced position, the surgeon can obviously modify the length of that proximal segment. As you can see though, it's designed to fit in this space. And this will overlay pelvic defects and will be an onlay and not a sling, so that you can place suturing around the edges after this has been reduced or repaired. As you see in this picture here, these are suture points, and this depicts repair underneath the lateral fascia. This implant cannot carry out such a function, as this was designed as its free ends being a sling with tapered ends to drag through fascia. There is no function as such with those dimensions that would work in this space. One is that it is not wide enough to overlay repaired defects and to reinforce, just as you see in male hernia repairs. It is a much wider piece of fascia that is inlaid on top of repairs and on top of repairs and on top of reductions. This does not carry out such a function, in that this description of its free ends, which are not only long enough, but also this width from here to here is exceptionally too long and of excess and cut in order to fit in this space if possible, but would not carry out the functions needed if it were even cut. Again, this long length was designed to traverse fascial planes and to spiral upon itself and reconnect in the middle. So to summarize, functional differences is this is sling technology with compression on the other side of the urethra, causing a compression in the anterior direction from the posterior location. This invention here provides posterior compression from an anterior direction, on the anterior aspect of the urethra, but in the posterior direction. The expandable body is a perfect measurement in order to allow focal compression in this area of this small amount of space. There are at least four fixing sutures here designed to tack into this periurethral fascia that carries out lateral to the urethra, which is not in the male. This creates a small area of space for focal expansion, as you see in these pictures here. These tacking sutures are important in that these are only about 2 centimeters apart. So as you can see, the expandable cushion is within the 2 centimeters and necessary, as a larger, broader expandable cushion and also a larger and broader distal segment will not fit in this area and provide compression. And that concludes the explained differences between my invention and a previous described implant for male urinary incontinence.